Well, welcome back to Inside MMA. UFC 304 was 4 days ago, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, but Belal Muhammad is an undisputed UFC champion. What just a shocker. The way he went in there from beginning to end was incredible, and he really made me look like a fool for everything I said. So, out of respect for the sport, and me being just an MMA lover in general, I was mad at first because I am a big fan of Leon, but I'm not a biased guy. Belal Muhammad grinded hard for that title. You could see it in the way he's been, and that is just a fact. But this is still a terrible outcome, and I wish it never happened. But, you know, at least Tom Aspinall won. I want to say I know I'm sorry, by the way, for saying this would come out at least 2 days after UFC 304, and it's been 4 days. A lot's been happening lately, and I have not been able to get to just straight up recording. So I will make 2 videos today to make up for that inconvenience. My PFL and Abu Dhabi predictions will be dropping not shortly after this. So, with that, yeah, let's just get right into all these matchups for UFC 304. This was just going to be main card winners and losers, but I thought that felt kind of empty because everyone in the prelims looked fairly impressive. So I wanted to do it for the prelim winners as well. So here we go. First fight. Shauna Bannon versus Josephine Nustin. Not a lot of concept in this fight. Bannon's on a 2-fight winning streak now after looking decent enough against Arlene. I didn't think she looked great, but she got the 2 rounds to 1 in my opinion, and she won the fight. So I think that makes her a top 40, 35 fighter in this division. I think the perfect fight for that is another grappler who's looked really impressive in her last 2 fights, and that's Josephine Nustin. I think this would be a great fight for someone to go the next step to the top 20 in the division, and it could be a striking fight with the grappling experience that these two both have. So, yeah, Bannon and Nustin, pretty simple. Up next, Mick Parkin versus Martin Buday. Mick Parkin really shocked me with how he was able to finish Lucas Brzeski. He came out very exciting, just like wild. And I don't know if it was the fans getting to him. I don't think he's ever performed in front of fans up to this point, but he looked really good. He looked excellent, and he looked sharper than even I expected. And I think that deserves, he's 4-0 in the UFC now. I think he should get a top 20, top 15 opportunity. I think the perfect guy for him to fight is a guy who, unlike Jamal Pogues, who he froze with his boxing, will be able to test him. He's more defensively sound. He's way more experienced than Pogues in the UFC, and he's 5-1 as a pro. He's on a win against Andrei Arlovski. Not a great fight, but he was 4-0 at one point. He lost to Shamil Gaziev, which is, kind of what killed his momentum for me. If he got that win, he probably would be competing in the top 10 right now. But, yeah, I think he could definitely push Parkin with his clinch game. I think Parkin would have to show just how good he is, and if he's ready for top 15, he'll put on a good performance against Martin Buday. Buday's kind of become a top 20 gatekeeper, and I think this would be a really fun fight to see who could come out on top. I don't know if it'd be fun matchup-wise, but for the rankings, it would shake it up a little bit. So it's kind of just a boxing versus grappling matchup to see who is the best there. So yeah, Parkin Buday. Up next, Sam Patterson. He really impressed me with how sharp he looked in the boxing against Crosby. Crosby's a brawler. He could definitely knock you out. So it really shocked me how crisp he looked, and for the way he was standing really tall and just looking really fast. And he really impressed me. He's on 2 straight wins now in the welterweight division, and moving up, which is something I definitely wouldn't have predicted for him, is kind of his blessing. So, yeah, I think he's definitely above other guys who perform this card, like Preston Parsons and Oban Elliott. I'll get into that later. But 2 straight wins, I think he deserves a top 40 guy, and I think the perfect guy for him to see if he's really on that next echelon level of the top 35-ish welterweights is a guy who's kind of become the gatekeeper for that top 40 range, in my opinion. That's Trevin Giles. Trevin Giles is a very two-dimensional fighter. He's got great wrestling. He could definitely test your striking, and he's competed with the best guys in the UFC. Carlos Prates, Gabriel Bonfim, Michael Morales, Dricus Duplessis, he's beaten Roman Dolidze, Preston Parsons as well, and, he's just a solid fighter, and I think if there's anyone that could test Sam Patterson to see if he's on that elite level, Giles is a perfect guy. He's never lost to somebody who doesn't turn out to be a top 30 prospect, so, yeah, Patterson-Giles, I think this would be a great test, and I would love to see it. Next fight, Mateusz Bukauskas versus Dustin Jacoby. As I predicted, that Bukauskas practicing a fight for whoever won. It was 50-50, and after the second round when he got hit with that head kick, he just grappled the whole fight. He was scared to get hit, and it was a shaky win, but he got it done by finish, and I think that should be rewarded for him. He's already top 25-ish in this division. I feel like he's top 20 with that win now. I feel like the losses to Petrino and he's 4-4 in the UFC. It's kind of killed his momentum a little bit, but I think he's starting to really find himself the more we see him in there. And I think a perfect fight where he's trying to build himself up is against another guy who could definitely build himself some momentum by getting back in the win column, and that's Dustin Jacoby. Dustin Jacoby has really just been on the short end of the stick in his last couple of fights. If you would have, I know for a fact, unless you didn't look at his record, you wouldn't have assumed he's lost one of his five, or he's lost 4 of his last 5 UFC fights and only won 1. It's crazy because a lot of people think those 5 fights, by the way, are Khalil Roundtree, Azamat Murzakanov, Kennedy Nzechukwu, who's the only guy he beat, Alonzo Menifield, and Dominic Reyes. Obviously, the Reyes knockout was fair. I don't disagree with that. Alonzo Menifield fight was extremely close, and I had Jacoby up 2-1 on my scorecard. He knocked out Kennedy Nzechukwu in the first round, which is something Carlos Ulberg couldn't do. You know, he had a really good third round against Azamat Murzakanov, and a lot of people think he beat Khalil Roundtree, and before that, he was running through people in the UFC. So I still think Jacoby's a top 20 guy. He could really build off of a win to show he's still elite with a win against a guy who's a grappler like Bukauskas. And I think this fight could just build them both up no matter what. So I think whoever wins this will definitely be a top 15 contender after, or at least get a shot at that. So yeah, Bukauskas and Jacoby. Up next, Oban Elliott versus Adam Fugit. Oban Elliott had a good win, and he did look a little better than I expected him to in the grappling. He controlled 2 out of the 3 rounds for the most part, and just out-grappled Preston Parsons completely. I thought Parsons would have put up a better fight than he did, but Elliott controlled for the most part. He did have some flaws in the third round that you could see. He left himself open to strikes. Parsons just really couldn't capitalize, landed a good elbow. But Parsons isn't a striker, so I didn't expect him to. Which leaves me thinking, Elliott's not really ready for it. Looks like the top 45 in the division. I think he's like a top 50 type guy. And I think a perfect fight to test if he can handle a striker and someone that could do what Val Woodburn could do on the feet, but also defend the takedowns and take advantage of those flaws in defense that Elliott has is Adam Fugit. Fugit's starting to look really good. He's coming off of his most impressive win against Josh Quinlan. He's 2-2 in the UFC. His only losses are, Mike Malott and Michael Morales. He looked decent in the Morales fight. He looked jittery in the Malott fight. But he's really starting to find himself. He's got a lot of round 1 finishes. He's a good overall balanced fighter. And I think he could definitely take advantage of those flaws that Woodburn and Parsons have and bring it to Oban Elliott. It's a good test for both of them. It could get him out of that top 40, in the division and move them upwards. So I think it's a good fight for both of them to prove themselves. Elliott and Fugit is my next fight. Up next, Jake Hadley versus Cameron Simon. Jake Hadley looks so good in his fight against Kalen Loughran, way better than I think even anyone who picked Hadley expected him to look. His jab was crisp, his striking, his boxing especially was clean. Loughran was a little stiff, but I won't take that away from Jake. He looked good. Even his takedown defense looked efficient, and I think this is definitely the place for him. It's the best fight he's had in like 5 UFC fights, and it's his only bantamweight fight. So I think he should definitely get a decent name next time out, and I think a perfect guy who could definitely benefit with a win against someone who's coming off of a good performance in Hadley is Cameron Simon. Cameron Simon was really good. He was on a 3-0 UFC run. He was running through people, out-grappling them, out-striking them, and he looked like the next big South African prospect. And then he lost to C-Rod and Peyton Talbot, and it kind of killed his momentum a little bit, but he's still a pretty well-known name. These are 2 guys who I think are in the top 50 that stack bantamweight division, which is no disrespect to either of them, and I think this is the perfect matchup for both of them to get back in it and recover. In terms of how I think this fight would go, I'm not really sure. I think the grappling, Simon would probably have most of the control in, considering, Loughran still did take Hadley down. But the coin toss on the feet is what really gets me. Both guys have great boxing. Simon probably is the better kickboxing, but it's a coin toss, and I think both guys could really make a big statement with a win. So Jake Hadley versus Cameron Simon. Up next, Bruno Brazil versus Victoria Dudakova. A lot of people think Bruno Brazil had an impressive performance. I don't. I think Bruno Brazil looked okay in the second and third rounds, but she still got taken down by a really bad grappler, Molly McCann. She looked like she was gassed, exhausted at the end of the second, but she did do really big damage. She looked sharp in the first round, I will say that. Those body kicks were clean. She was having perfect technique with the knees. She looked good in moments and bad in most of it, but she still got the win. She beat a good name in Molly McCann, and I think she is top 30 in the division. I think a perfect fight for her to test her where she really lacks the fundamentals in the wrestling, where she's had a lot of struggles, is Victoria Dudukova. Now, you will see in all these fights that I've made, people that are booked aren't here, so you're probably like, why is Victoria Dudukova here if she's fighting on Saturday? I think win or lose for Dudukova. Brazil is so in the middle echelon of the division. I mean, she's 3-2 in the UFC. I think this is the perfect fight, win or lose. Dudukova is still 2-0 in the UFC, and even if she wins or loses, it's just the perfect fight to me. You know? Like, if Victoria Dudukova does win and she gets in the top 15 with the win, you know, good for her. I don't know, but I think it's a perfect fight, win or lose, against Sam Hughes. Obviously, you'll see who I pick later, but I think it's a really fun fight to test her wrestling, and it's striking versus grappling matchup to see if Brazil is really as sharp as she looks, and a win for either of them, win or lose for Dudukova, like I said, could get them a top 20, top 15 opportunity next up. So yeah, Brazil, Dudukova. Next fight. I have been calling for this fight for 2 years now, and it annoys me every time I don't see it booked. Nathaniel Wood's coming off of a win. Yusuf is coming off of a 2-fight losing streak, being number 15 in the world. I think it's now the perfect time to make this fight. Nathaniel Wood continues to come in front of crowds and have the funnest fights ever. Daniel Pineda, Andre Fili, Naimov. His last 4 or 5 fights have been incredible. He's a brawler style. It's the same as Yusuf. And I think it's a really technical matchup that could... It's guaranteed fireworks if you know how both of these guys fight. You know, I feel like Nathaniel Wood got robbed in the Muhammad Naimov fight, like a lot of people do. The cage grab by Naimov costs Wood this decision, and, you know, it was just very disrespectful, and Wood came back, beat Pineda. I think he cemented himself as a top 20 fighter in the division. So I think one more fight, he's top 15, and I think a perfect guy who could bounce back from 2 straight losses against a guy like Wood is Sadiq Yusuf. Sadiq Yusuf was heavily hyped in the last 2 years. You know, he lost to Edson Barboza and then Diego Lopez, and it kind of killed that hype, but he could definitely bounce back with a win against a guy like Nathaniel Wood. Both guys are top 20. Like I said, I've been calling for this fight forever. They would definitely brawl on the feet. I think the wrestling is slightly Wood's, but, you know, Yusuf has great submission skills. It's a great fight, and I really want to see it. I think guaranteed top 15 contention for whoever wins this between Nathaniel Wood and Sadiq Yusuf. So Wood and Yusuf is what I want to see for these two guys next. Next fight. First fight on our main card. Guys, obviously Manelkop and Mokaev didn't deliver. I mean, it literally got Mokaev cut out of the promotion. And as much as I don't like Mokaev's attitude and the way he acts, I think it's disrespectful to cut him after he is now 7-0 in the UFC. It's crazy to me. But, you know, this also kind of just got people to stop talking about how good Manelkop's looked in the last 2 years. And I think the only way to revive Manelkop is to have him go up against the loser of this 305 fight between Steve Erceg and Kai Kara-France. And let me tell you why. Kopp is now probably like three fights per se, I guess, from a title shot, right? He's like at the same position of Alex Perez. And I would have booked Kopp and Perez probably if Perez wasn't injured right now. But this puts Manelkop in that 7 to 8 spot. I think on the rankings he is number 8, and I think he's number 9. He's number 9 in the rankings right now. And I think Steve Erceg, you know, number 7 in the rankings, really because of his fight with Pantoja. Kai Kara-France being number 4, it's going to knock them down an echelon considering they're both coming off of losses. So I think the perfect way to revive Kopp is to, number 1, get him some unfinished drama against Kai Kara-France. You could revive that drama, have a really hyped up fight between a guy who's definitely going to bring a better fight than Muhammad Mokaev, because Kai Kara-France is a brawler and everyone knows he never doesn't have an exciting fight. You know, besides probably Amir Albazi, but he is a wrestler, and that's why. Now, I'd rather see Kopp and Erceg because I know Steve Erceg would give him a fight. If you've watched Steve Erceg fight, you know he does not like to grapple. He doesn't like to do it. He wants to strike. They're both timely strikers. A lot of elbows and knees involved in that one. And I don't know who would win in both of these matchups, but I really want to see it, and I feel like it's a perfect way to build Kopp back up as a top 10 guy. Both fights are definitely firework fights, in my opinion. You know, no matter how Kopp performed against Mokaev, every single fight he's been in, where he's won it and, you know, hasn't had to fight a grappler, he's performed. And I think he was just a little, you know, shell-shocked. And I think the perfect fight is to have Kopp go up against the loser of this one. Next fight, This was just for fun. Muhammad Mokaev versus Jesus Pinedo. Now, I know PFL is tournament-based, and, yeah, you can't really control what the matchup is, but I think a perfect fight for Muhammad Mokaev now that it's practically, you know, it's practically official he's going to the PFL. Yes, if you don't watch PFL, featherweight is the lowest class in the division, or in the PFL, sorry. It's the lowest class in the PFL. There's no bantamweights, there's no flyweights. It's just featherweights, lightweights, I think welterweights, middleweights, and light heavyweights. And heavyweights. I think it's just 145 to 265, but I'm not positive. But I think this is a perfect fight. Jesus Pinedo has improved heavily over the last 2 years, and he's on a 3-fight winning streak right now. Was supposed to fight Pitbull, a fight I really wanted to see, but he pulled out. I think he might have got hurt. I'm not sure, but a lot of people used to consider his grappling as his weakness, and a lot of people consider Mokaev's striking his weakness. So I think this fight would be very fast-paced. I think Pinedo would bring a fire that Cobb didn't bring because of how he fought guys who can grapple like Brandon Lawlane and Bubba Jenkins. And I think this would just be a fun fight to test both of their quote-unquote weaknesses. So Mokaev, Pinedo is definitely what I want to see if Mokaev does go to the PFL. One's always an option, but I don't think Mokaev will go there. Mokaev Pinedo is what I want to see next. Next fight, Giga Chikadze fought exactly how I expected him to. He had a better first round than I anticipated. Arnold Allen didn't wrestle. I didn't expect him really to, because he's become more of a brawler as his fights have gone on, but I did expect him to wrestle for some of it. But at the end of the day, he got the win. He timed Giga better than I thought he would, and now Chikadze falls in the rankings, I'm pretty sure, to like number 11 with that loss. He's number 10. He's number 10. He was number 10. He didn't go down. And, with Giga being that now top 10 guy, I think the perfect fight for him is the guy right underneath him at number 11, and that's Lerone Murphy. Lerone Murphy fought a kickboxer in his last fight in Edson Barboza. He looked way better than I thought he would. He had a perfect game plan, and I'd love to see him fight another kickboxer where he can execute that. He always brings fun fights. Giga will bring a fun fight back, and I think both guys have looked extremely impressive against Edson. It's time to match them up against each other. Lerone Murphy could really benefit from it, and Giga could stay in the top 10 from it. So Giga versus Lerone Murphy is what I want to see next, and I think it's the only fight for either of them. Next, Arnold Allen versus Yair Rodriguez. Now, I know a lot of people wanted to see Arnold Allen versus Josh Emmett, but I disagree. Arnold Allen is number 5 now, tied, I'm pretty sure, with Movsarevlev, so technically he's still 6, but since he got the win, he moved up. It's a weird little, basis, but he did lose to Movsar, so he is number 6. Josh Emmett is under him at number 7, and Yair is number 4, and that is exactly why I don't think he should fight Josh Emmett. Josh Emmett lost to Yair Rodriguez, he beat Bryce Mitchell, but before that lost to Ilya, and hasn't competed as much as Allen, who's competed with 2 top 4 guys in the division like Movsarevlev and Max Holloway. Very competitive fights, and I think he should only fight up after beating another top 10 guy. So, Allen and Emmett would be fun, but I just don't think it's the right time to make it. Yair Rodriguez is a way better matchup. He's a better kickboxer than Giga, in my opinion. He's the best kickboxer in the UFC featherweight division. I feel like he's shown that time and time again with the way he's timed guys like Holloway, Ortega, Volkanovski, the absolute best in the division. And it'd just be fun to see how Allen fights Yair, whether he decides to wrestle him, whether he strikes him. That'd be way more exciting, and I really do want to see this fight to show if Yair has takedown defense and can outstrike another top 5 guy and really get a finish that could, save him from falling in the featherweight division after losing to the best. So it's a really competitive fight, intriguing matchup I really want to see, because I don't think Allen would wrestle as much as most people expect, and that's Yair's, main fault. So it'd be a fun fight to see, and I really want to see it. It's a top 5 fight, and I think it's perfect to make. UFC shouldn't pass up on it before it's too late and they can't make it. Allen Yair is what I want to see next. Next fight, fight that really just made me sad. I really expected a first round finish no matter what, but it seems like CLD was just scared to strike with RoboCop, and he just clinched, and he had a chance to become a superstar, and he blew it. He lost to RoboCop, and I think that drops him into the top 40, 45-ish of the division with that loss. And I think a perfect fight to get him right back to being considered a top guy is against a guy who can grapple, and a guy who is a vet and will bring it to him, and that's Eric Anders. Eric Anders is coming off a win against Jamie Pickett. He fell short against Barry Oates. he's fallen short to the top 30 guys in the division, but he has looked the best in some cases early on in some of his fights and lately. So I really do want to see him fight. And I'd just be very excited to see these two go up against each other. He kind of has an iffy style. Sometimes he brings a fight. Sometimes he grapples and clinches, which would also be competitive for CLD. I feel like Eric Anders isn't as powerful as RoboCop, obviously, so CLD would have a better chance of timing him at angles, which I said he was going to do against RoboCop. It's a competitive fight I want to see, and it's a top 40-35-ish fight for both guys in the division. I think they could both benefit from it and get themselves right back out there into competing with the top 30 in the division. So, yeah. Up next, RoboCop versus the winner of Chris Curtis and Kevin Holland. Now, I was making this, and then they wanted to announce Chris Curtis and Kevin Holland at UFC 307. I've been begging for that fight for over a year now. I'm so glad they're doing it now. They're both number 15 in their respective divisions, and I think the winner should fight Gregory Rodriguez, RoboCop. He's 7-2 in the UFC. I think it's finally time you give him his opportunity at the rankings. He's on a 3-fight winning streak. The loss to Bruno Ferreira killed his momentum a little bit. He got right back in there, just beat CLD, beat a gatekeeper like Tavares. He always brings a fight, and I think this is the absolute best fight to bring fireworks. Now, for both of these guys, all three of these guys, number one, are all known for their incredible chins, right? Chris Curtis, by the way, this fight is at middleweight. It's not at welterweight, which is why I'm doing this. Chris Curtis is a guy who's also only been knocked out once in his career by Ray Cooper in the PFL. He brawls with everybody. The only guys he hasn't brawled with are Amavov and Hermanson, and that's because they ran away. Gregory Rodriguez will not do that. He will give you a fight. Two guys who are known for their chin. They've only been knocked out once. They're practically even on the feet. I don't think Chris Curtis would, get taken down, considering Allen couldn't really do a good job at that until Curtis gassed. This fight, guaranteed someone's getting knocked out. RoboCop versus Curtis, it's definitely a fight I want to see. It's absolute fireworks, guaranteed, no hesitation. And this fight could definitely be fight of the year, in my opinion. Now, Gregory Rodriguez versus Kevin Holland is a little more interesting. I think Kevin Holland would have a little more trouble in the grappling, but I also think he can have a lot more success in the grappling because he's lankier and he could give submission threats to RoboCop. I also think this fight would be great, but I don't think Kevin Holland would brawl. I think he'd try to make it a technical fight, try to bring it to RoboCop, and that's what makes it fun. I feel like these are both great matchups for him. I think RoboCop, no matter what, should get a top 15 opportunity in his next fight, and I think these are the perfect guys to give him that type of fight that Dana wants to see so bad. So, yeah, RoboCop versus the winner of Curtis and Holland is what I want to see next. Next fight, King Green. He just continues to show me that he is the most inconsistent gatekeeper since Michael Johnson. I describe him here as, an exciting Neil Magny at lightweight. He always brings the boxing. He's always there to fight, but he always falls apart in the big challenges. I think he's still top 20 in the division, but I think the perfect fight for him is the winner of the fight between Matt Frevola and Fares Ziam coming up in Paris. Frevola is pretty much a top 20 fighter as well. He lost to Benoit Saint-Denis that knocked him out of the rankings. He's beaten Drew Dober. He's had a competitive fight with Arman Sarukian. He's 11-4-1 as a pro. I'm pretty sure he's 5-4 in the UFC. Kind of the same as Bobby Green on that same echelon. And I think he could definitely give Bobby Green a banger. It'd definitely be a boxing fight. And it's just interesting to see who would win between Frevola and King Green. Now, the other fight, Fares Ziam. That's a much more technical fight that I think Ziam would take a grappling approach to. Which makes it more competitive. I've seen Fares Ziam, lose to these power puncher type of guys, Terrence McKinney, Don Madge in the past. And he also gets played sometimes mentally, but he's really looking the best he's ever looked. He's got 3 straight wins right now, which include Jai Herbert and Claudio Puelles. He's shown his grappling. He's shown his striking. And I think Bobby Green is a good test if he can beat Matt Frevola. And then a top 15 opportunity is in order for Ziam. I don't think he should get one right after he beats Frevola if he does, because, he still has struggled in the past. I think one more big test for him in Bobby Green would be perfect. And then Ziam could chase his top 15 opportunity. Either way, both of these matchups are great. Green and Ziam is much more intriguing. Frevola and Green is guaranteed to be a brawl, and I like both of these matchups for Green. I think the top 20 is perfect for him, and I'd love to see it. So yeah. Paddy Pimblett, as most would expect, or as most would say, I feel, he really impressed. He really surprised a lot of people, including myself, and looked absolutely A+ against Bobby Green. I don't know if you want to say, Bobby shot the takedown, so it kind of ruins it a little bit. Paddy still showed how good of a grappler he is. He's absolutely excellent there, and he called out Renato Moicano after the fight, so this should be no surprise to anyone. I think Paddy should fight the loser of BSD Moicano no matter what. He called out Moicano, but if Moicano was to win, I think he should fight higher in the top 10. But yeah, Paddy Pimblett versus the loser of Anthony Moicano. Now, if I break these down, I think BSD is number 11 in the division. I think Moicano is 10. So, two top 10 guys. Pimblett's number 15. So, no, BSD is 12. Moicano is 10. Sorry. Paddy Pimblett's obviously number 15 after beating Bobby Green. Both of these matchups are fun. I think they'd be guaranteed fireworks. I honestly think Pimblett and BSD would be better because BSD, in my opinion, is a better striker than Moicano. They're two brawlers. Pimblett keeps his chin very high. Pimblett, the grappling, 50-50. The pressure between the two, it's a competitive fight, and I think BSD could gas Pimblett out, but I also think Paddy could have a lot of success in the submissions, considering how many times Poirier almost guillotined BSD. So it's a very fun fight. I really want to see more. But for the drama, Moicano and Paddy would obviously sell more. The grappling is 50-50 to me. I don't know who would win in that, but I do think Paddy has the striking advantage, at least in the boxing. Kicking, I'm not sure. Very good matchups for Paddy no matter what next. I really want to see both of them. And I think Paddy really just surprised everybody, and he's top 15 for sure. I think he showed it. Next fight. Now, I thought of a lot of options for Curtis Blaydes, and I had the loser of Stipe and Jones in mind, and the loser of Gane and Volkov, and here's what I have come to. I have come to the conclusion that it should be the loser of Gane and Volkov for one reason. Whoever loses that Jones and Stipe fight, I'm convinced if it even happens, we're never going to see it again. Or we're never going to see them again, whoever the loser is. I'm mostly saying it's going to be Stipe because I think everyone thinks John is going to beat Stipe, but you'll see later. I'm not completely sold on that fight. I think these are the only two guys in the division Curtis Blaydes hasn't fought. He's literally fought in everybody. These two guys, Gane and Volkov, after the whole Aspinall Jones situation with Stipe in there as well, kind of blows over. Gane and Volkov are both one fight away from a title shot. Volkov just got his most impressive win against Sergey Pavlovich, and Gane has just looked great in the grappling recently, beating a guy like Spivak. So how do I think both of these fights go? I think Blaydes could still sell himself, a win that could get him a title shot, especially if it's against one of these guys. But Blaydes and Gane is just a wrestler-striker matchup, in my opinion. Gane's obviously the better striker. I think he'd be a lot more technical. He'd probably time Blaydes a lot more better. But Blaydes has better wrestling than anyone Gane, I feel, has ever fought. And considering he got out-wrestled by Ngannou, Blaydes could use his wrestling big time. So it's a really big striker-grappler matchup. Nothing else to it. Blaydes and Volkov have fought once before, a very long time ago. Curtis won the decision, I think, in a Fight Night main event. Back in 2020. Volkov has obviously, in my opinion at least, looked better than ever since that fight. After that Curtis Blaydes fight, I'm pretty sure he's like 6-2 in the UFC, and one of those losses is Tom Aspinall, and the other is Cyril Gane. And, beating Sergey, beating Ty, beating Rosenstrike, Volkov's looked the most impressive, and I think he can give a better challenge. I don't know, Blaydes obviously has a grappling advantage, but a really competitive fight no matter what, and I really want to see these fights. A top 5 fight guaranteed for whoever loses this fight versus Curtis Blaydes, and it's a good bounce back for whoever can win against Curtis Blaydes if it were to get booked. So, it's all dependent on strategy for all these matchups. Nobody should be surprised at this one. Tom Aspinall versus John Jones. Tom Aspinall is the interim champion. Everybody wants to see this fight. Nobody wants to see the Stipe fight. And, honestly, a while ago, I was like, John's doing the right thing. He's fighting a legacy fight. Stipe is the greatest heavyweight of all time, and beating him would just, give John, in the long run, the better and safer strategy. We're not going to know how Tom is in 2 years. He might just be someone we talked about and, got one big loss and then went on a big losing streak. But he's convinced me. Tom Aspinall is starching heavyweights left and right in the first round. He's touching guys. He literally touched Curtis Blaydes one time and Curtis fell. He touched Sergey once. Sergey fell. He touches everybody and they just fall. It's crazy to me. And I really do think Tom Aspinall is just on another level. I do. And this fight needs to happen before John retires. Tom versus Jones is what I want to see next. Screw the Stipe fight. We don't want to see it. It's a technical heavyweight fight. This would make John even better considering Aspinall is better now. It's just the perfect fight. And it's the perfect way for Jones to go out in the sunset. So Aspinall and Jones is what I want to see next. and now Leon Edwards. I'm going to say, I was mad about the Belal fight, but now, after, seeing how everything's played out, I'm not mad about it, because this is the fight that I wanted. I didn't want Leon to fight Shavkat. I wanted Leon to fight Della Maddalena. I think Della Maddalena is a bigger test. I think Della Maddalena has the better skill set. In the boxing, he's a mile better than Shavkat. This is the fight I want to see, and I'm happy because now I feel we're going to see it. Leon's an amazing kickboxer with grappling experience. Maddalena showed how good he is in the grappling stuff in the Gilbert Burns takedown, shutting everyone up after what they said about him fighting Hafez on short notice. I think this is a perfect fight. It's way more intriguing. And Della's got insane boxing that, Leon struggled with boxing in the past, whether it be a guy like Barberena, Nate Diaz. It's just something he struggled with. And I think this is a perfect fight. I think Leon could get starch cold. I think Leon could show how skillful he is as a welterweight and absolutely dominate JDM. It's a perfect fight. It intrigues me a lot. And I think he could present problems for JDM, and JDM can present problems for Leon, and it's that simple. It's a competitive welterweight fight. The winner, in my opinion, probably gets a title shot. And yeah, and to no surprise for anyone, the main event, Belal Muhammad versus Shavkat Rakhmonov. Belal shocked the world by getting a Khabib-esque decision, just like he said he would over Leon. He put the crowd to sleep, just like he always does, and, he won. And now this is where Belal dies. I'm 100% confident Shavkat beats him. I know what I said. I feel Leon's better than Shavkat. I feel like JDM's a bigger challenge. That doesn't mean I don't like Shavkat. Shavkat has got next-level submission skills, and I think that's where this problem comes in. The boxing advantage is massive. Leon's a very fast starter, in my opinion. You've seen his last couple fights. He dropped Usman in round 1. He took Usman down in the first fight. He tried to out-wrestle Colby in round 1. He controls the pace of the fight. Belal didn't allow him to do that. Shavkat will not let that happen. He will pressure Belal as much as Belal pressures him. And he's a better boxer. He's a better kickboxer. He's a better grappler. I feel like he's just better everywhere. But the grappling would be interesting. Shavkat could definitely get taken down. It's a competitive fight, and I really want to see it. Belal and Shavkat is the obvious fight to make next, and that should be a great first welterweight type championship defense to see what kind of Belal fight we're going to see and what kind of champion Belal is going to be. So these are my matchups for UFC 304, or after UFC 304, and what I want to see next. So there you go, guys. These are all the fights I want to see. I think everyone did pretty well except Mokaev and Kopp, and maybe all those main card fights beside Arnold Allen, Giga Chikadze, Paddy Pimblett, and Tom Aspinall, and obviously the main event. But a lot of fights delivered, some didn't. The prelims kind of carried, and it was a pretty decent card. Definitely not what I expected it to be, but I think UFC 305 will deliver a lot better. But with that, I've been Inside MMA, and see you.